Hi, I'm Lindsay Juergens, and this is Leaders Like Us. Thank you to JBS for being our series sponsor. Today's special guest is the one and only Venus King. Thank you for joining me, Venus.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. I know currently you are a business teacher at Central Community College, and you're also doing a very unique thing and running a business called Monection. So I'm excited to hear about all the things. But before I start in with specifics, why don't you just share a little bit about background for someone who may not know you?
Yeah. So I spent probably close to 20 years out in the business industry, wore many different hats. My first job actually here in Grand Island was for what used to be called Grand Island School of Business. Oh, yeah. It doesn't exist anymore. It's a parking lot now downtown. And then when that facility closed, I actually went and started working in banking, and I stayed there for, probably 8 to 10 years. And then left there after getting my master's degree and went to College Park and was the director there for a while, and then went over to Conestoga Mall and managed the marketing division. And then I was really ready. I've always had a heart of teaching, like whatever I have done. So on the side, I would do teaching fitness classes, or if I was working in banking, I was helping people kind of navigate through their money. And so I always had the heart of a teacher. And so yeah, for about 7 years, I've been a business teacher at Central Community College, and leading for me looks really different now. I'm leading in a classroom, but still so many of the concepts still apply there that they would probably in the business industry.
Sure. It's interesting that you say, you have a heart for teaching, and I can see that in you. I've not been in a classroom of yours, but I can see that you're a sharer of knowledge. And what I have found over the years is that some people are just naturally drawn to that. So, what speaks to you about sharing your knowledge with others?
Well, according to the Gallup Strengths Finder, I'm a learner.
Yeah.
And that has almost got me in trouble from time to time, because when you're a learner, you want to soak everything in. But sometimes we want to feel like we have enough knowledge that at some point we're going to feel confident enough to kind of step forward and move on our own. And so there was definitely a season in my life where I'm like, okay, just one more book, one more podcast, one more certification, and at that point then I'll feel confident to step forward. And I've really, in the last probably 5 to 10 years of my life, have started to have to accept to move forward and not only share, but take steps in scary steps. That's what leadership is about. Like, you're kind of the person to raise your hand and be like, I'll go first, even though you don't know the answers. I'm a connector. If you would ask me, 2 things that describe me: I grow people, which sounds so funny. Like, yes, I'm a mom, but whether, again, we're growing people in getting their education, whether growing people where we're leading them and managing them, or in fitness. And then I'm also a facilitator of relationships. I've been one to say I'm not typically ever really the star of the show. I'm the glue. And I love getting to know people and know their stories. I've been accused of asking people too many questions, but I think each one of us kind of have that beautiful story within us. And when you know what skill set you have, then when I meet other people, I can connect people together.
I love that. I feel like that's a kindred spirit moment for me as well. It's really fun to be able to introduce folks who you think like, oh, you should know this person. That's like, you two should totally know. Or how have you thought about this? Because you're so good at this. Have you tried that option? I love that.
Yep.
That's fun.
Yeah.
As a teacher, you're working with college kids, obviously.
Mainly, yeah. Mainly. I mean, sometimes most of my audience, yes, they're 18 to 20, but I've definitely had people that are 40 and 50 years old in the classroom, which is very fun in itself because they have a lot of life experience to offer. But yeah, majority, they're young adults.
Yeah, and then there are similarities, but there are definitely dissimilarities between that and your work with Monection. So would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, Monection, it's kind of a unique name. People are like, what is Monection? But those of us around here, I think some of us have heard it enough that we're like, oh yeah, Monection. Monection stands for more connection. There's that connected word again. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, one of our basic needs as people, beyond, having a roof over our head and feeling safe, the next one is connectedness. And this group is specifically for women who want to connect, obviously. They want to have courage, which means they are going to show up authentically. So often in life, we kind of are masked up. I know I struggled with that for a long time. But again, when you look at working with students or whether it be in leadership, I think some of the hardest things that we can do would be vulnerable and show up as we are.
Yeah.
But when people see you as you're relatable and they feel like they can connect with this. So it's courage. The
Right.
women in there are like, I'm ready to be me and be authentic. And then communication. So we do have guest speakers that come in so that we can learn. We're growers. And it's been going, gosh, the initial one, we got together in person probably 3 years ago. Shame on me. They're like, this is great. Let's do it again. When's the next one? And I was like, I don't have a plan for a next one.
Right, right.
And so it sat idle for about a year and a half. And then it was about a year ago. I really felt like this, like it was something within me that was missing. And so I'm like, let's just give it a shot. And it's just grown and it's been super fun. But yeah,
I
it's
love
more
that.
connection.
I love it. So can you describe a little bit about your cohorts? Like, what is the time frame? Just share maybe some of the nuts and bolts of Monection.
For Monection?
Yeah.
Well, there is no cohort, which is awesome. Women, we're
Okay.
busy. We're busy.
Yeah, we're
so
known for that, yeah.
in this group, we have women who are entrepreneurs. We have women who are directors of facilities, women who are managing people, but we also have like moms of little kids, moms who are the CEOs of their homes and they're staying at home.
Sure.
And so what I usually do is I say, if you want to be on the list or in the email group or Facebook group, I usually just put out there like, hey, here's the topic today. This is what we're going to be talking about. If you want to hop in, this is the cost. This is where we'll meet. We're either meeting on Zoom or in person. You come and go as you wish.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I think that's so much, we're busy.
Yeah, it's true.
And we like the a la carte. We want to jump in when we can and then not feel like, I think that's why a lot of people don't jump in because they feel like they have to commit.
Yeah,
And
it's true.
that's difficult. My kids are getting older now, but I know when they were in high school, things would come up at the last, like literally the last minute.
Right.
That they had an event or something that I didn't realize. And so I just try to allow for that flexibility.
I love that so much. That's so cool. So like how many women then are in your email group right now?
I think we have 40 some.
Cool.
I would say we probably have about 15 to 20 active members. And it just kind of depends. The summer months we kind of take off. We do fun stuff like we did a yoga outside or actually it rained. It ended up in my basement of my house. That was ideal. Flexibility, right?
Yep. Curveballs.
But yeah, I would say there's probably a really set group for sure of like 15 of us that
That's
I see
cool.
often. And
What a
people are
good
like
group size,
inviting their
though.
friends. And
Yeah.
when it's not so huge, sometimes it can allow for people to feel not too nervous to speak up.
Yep.
And I've learned that. So even as we've ever had a bigger group, I kind of try to break people into smaller
for you.
areas so they can
That's
feel free to
smart.
share. Yeah.
Because why? Because it creates more connection, right?
More
That's what we learned.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah. Thank you for
So
asking.
why do you think, so you're right about the chart, the Maslow's chart, I can't speak.
Hierarchy of needs.
Hierarchy of needs. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Why do you think connection is so essential to us, to humans? Because I agree with you. I mean, it's clear, the evidence is there, but why do you think that is?
I think we're just created that way. You know, not one single person has all the skill sets that we need. Like we were just built to have to rely on one another. And if you end up in a classroom with me, students pick up real quickly. Like I'm a big person of like, let's participate, let's get in small groups. Because when you don't have a group that's positive to connect with, because we have that need as people will gravitate towards anybody. Does that make sense? And
Yes,
so
it
if
does.
you can create spaces, or if you're not connected, imagine if you belong to a group and you're not connected to somebody within that group. It's really easy to fall off.
Yeah.
Versus if you're part of a group and people get to know you and they know you by your name, which is so powerful, and you don't show up, you better know maybe somebody's going to come looking for you, call you out on social media, whatever. Again, it's that belonging feeling. But I get
Yeah.
concerned. It's how we're made.
Yeah. And I tend to also take things back to our young people in my mind, and
Yes,
that's just so
yes.
true of young people too. And so when we're thinking about elementary level kids, they need a sense of belonging, and they need that sense of like, did anyone notice I wasn't there today? So I think it starts young, it starts so early,
Yeah.
and you're totally right.
Yep, it absolutely does. And I just want, I mean, everything that you guys are doing is just all that connectedness and building. I still am good friends with some people from my class 26.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I still am friends
Of
with
Leadership
them
Tomorrow.
because of that. And I want to call it the new name, which is.
Well, the organization is Leadership Unlimited, but the class
I'm still
is
LT? Okay, I'm still
No, there
LT.
is still LT.
All right,
The class,
all right.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
I
No,
want
you're
it-
fine.
all
You're
right.
fine. LT class 26 for you though.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was at a really pivotal time in my life. I've always had a heart for being a leader,
Yeah.
and I've had some really great mentors in my life. I'm so thankful for that. Our community is, I am constantly telling my students, like, go network, go get to know people, because that's really who our community is. But Leadership Tomorrow just came into my life at a very pivotal time. And I'm so really grateful for it, but it is kind of that sense of belonging, right? I'm class 26, I belong.
Right. And like you said, you're able to even keep in touch with a handful of the folks from the
Yeah.
class. That's pretty special about that shared experience piece. I'm thinking about, you've done a lot of different things. You've got all this really cool experience. You love to share your knowledge. What do you think would be next for you? Because I know there's no sedentary about you. So what would the next challenge on your horizon be?
Yeah. So my husband, he's like, so what's next?
What's next?
You know what's interesting is that was a part of me I didn't like before. Like, why can't I sit still? I'm also a maximizer on the Gallup StrengthsFinder. And so I always like to look at things and see where they're good and how I can make them great or really hone in on my skill. So I had shared with you, I'm just wrapping up. I wrote a book and it's getting ready to come out. And that is something that
That's so cool.
literally has been on my to-do list like my entire life. I think that there are things in life that were like, someday I'm going to do this. And as you're getting older, the some days are just becoming less and less.
Yeah.
And I knew this was something that if I made this promise to myself and I broke it, like, I'm not expecting perfection. I've already navigated through overcoming, dealing with perfectionism. I'm all about taking messy action at this time in my life.
I love that. I love that you put it that way.
Well, it is though, but that's
Yeah.
how you even, I was thinking about, like, what does expansion feel like when we expand as people? Expansion feels very uncomfortable.
Bingo.
Expansion feels like a possibility of failure or looking criticized or whatever.
Right.
And I had to get comfortable with that. So what is next for me? That's a great question, because I've had to accept that part of me. Like, I'm probably never really going to sit idle for very long. That's just not who I am.
Right.
Our youngest son is graduating here in a few short months.
Oh my
and so
goodness.
I'm going to wrap up my book and continue with Monection because I love it so much and giving my effort to being the greatest teacher I can be. But I'm going to just focus on being mommy here for the next 8 months or so until he goes to college.
It's a busy time.
And then we'll be empty nesters, and I'm very open. I'm very, very open
Yeah.
for whatever lies ahead. So I just kind of
That's perfect.
keep my eyes open for
Yeah. It's
what
a stay
nudge
tuned.
when I feel, it is stay tuned.
Yeah.
It is stay tuned.
That's so cool.
Sometimes I don't think that you can put things, there's something that came up from 5 years ago, and I was doing some journaling. I do a lot of journaling and inner work, and if I could have even imagined where the last, 5 years ago, me versus where I am today, I don't think I could have even imagined that. So
Right.
I'm all about kind of putting plans out there, but I'm also about let's be flexible because people see things and they're like, what about this?
Yeah.
And I just try to be open.
Such a good point. Just thinking about as we grow, I think about that all the time. Like, would Lindsay of 10 years ago recognize Lindsay today? Probably not.
I think I know Lindsay from almost 10 years
Yeah,
ago.
you do. And
Yeah.
I'm sure she had redeemable qualities. But the truth is, we just continue to learn. And I think folks like us, and I feel like I shouldn't be putting myself in your box.
You
You're like a mega star.
No,
but
no.
but truly though, like folks who are like, what's next? Like, let me try this thing. Let me, you know what? Failure is the best gift we can ever give ourselves anyway. And when you figure out like, oh, that hurt, that was very uncomfortable for me. It's an opportunity for growth. And over the years, I've had a tendency to tell my kids, you know, when you're happy, that's great. When things are going really well, splendid. Everyone's having a great time. But you're not growing. It's when you're willing to get uncomfortable that there's an opportunity for growth. And that's, you know, that sticks with me a lot. I have to get uncomfy to grow. And I know for a fact that you get that.
I do get that.
So it's a good personal challenge to be like, am I too comfortable right now? I think I am. I better try something weird.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I just think of, you know, so often people don't give themselves permission to like just pivot
Yeah.
and evolve as people. And I have watched you just completely, I literally was like, were you the person that used to know when I pulled up and you gave me my exact coffee that I wanted back in the day?
Yeah.
Like I still, like that is some of the
That's so
best
funny.
customer service I have
Aw.
ever experienced. However,
You're so sweet.
you've evolved as a person to like this. You were always a beautiful being, but now you're like, wow.
Oh, goodness gracious.
But I think so often we're like, well, I told so-and-so this is who I was going to be, or
Yeah.
I put it out on social media that this is what I was going to do, and
Yeah.
what are people going to say? And I'm like, nobody lives your life but you. And you know what?
That's so true.
Give yourself permission to pivot.
Yeah.
Sometimes
There's a
you
lot
have to like try stuff out,
Yeah.
and you find out this isn't what I wanted it to be. It's okay.
So powerful. Knowing what you don't like and who you're not. I think a lot of times there is so much more value in that than making the declaration about who you think you should be and who you think you'll be in 5 years, because who cares? Honestly.
I think what you said is so powerful, and because it is hard to identify like who am I or who do I want to become, and it can be much easier to just grab onto, let me identify who I'm not.
Yep.
Who I'm not. Talking about leading people, I'm just thinking when, gosh, I was a new leader in my mid-30s, probably College Park times, truly. Like, I was leading people, and I had my master's degree in management and leadership, and I like just knew it all, right?
Yeah, sure.
And a really wise person once told me, if somebody tells you something once, pay attention. But if multiple people tell you the same feedback about yourself, you really, really need to listen, okay?
So true.
And I had some really brave people in my life during that time that looked me in the eyes and said, you don't listen.
Oh,
And
that's powerful.
so, of course you might hear it from your spouse once, but when you hear it from I was the president of a nonprofit board here in town, and then I was leading, College Park, and when you have multiple people coming at you, I knew that I needed to do some work on me and then become a person of I'm not a person who's going to shut people down. I'm not a person who's going to interrupt others when they're speaking. But who do I want to become? And I had to work a lot on my listening skills. And I think I'm making a good job, because I do have a lot of people tell me I'm a good listener, but I was not always that way. But I had to allow myself to evolve.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing that. Just personally speaking, I have so much respect for anyone who can be like, man, I was getting that wrong. I was way off base over there. Seriously, you're a human being, and you've allowed yourself to grow. The declarations of perfection or the fear of admitting you're wrong for the sake of a perfectionistic appearance, dead end bill. Just doesn't go anywhere. There's no room for growth. So thank you so much for even being willing to share that.
Oh, you're welcome. I mean, honestly, and me at that time, it was really hard.
Oh,
to
no
swallow.
doubt.
A lot of
Yeah.
ego had to step aside. But I think that to grow in your leadership, you really do need to be open to feedback from the right people. There's always going to be people that have opinions and so forth, but to surround yourself with really wise counsel who are willing to speak truth into you and reflect back maybe some blind spots that you don't see that are
Right.
impacting those that you're leading and surrounding yourself around. Dr. Henry Cloud has this thing called The Wake, and I don't know if you've heard of
I'm
it or if we've,
unfamiliar.
oh my goodness, I love it so much. But he talks about what's it like to be on the other side of you. And I think that's such a powerful question. And he talks about a wake, like a boat leaves two lines behind it.
Yeah.
And one is, did I get this job done? And there's a lot of leaders who can say, yes, I got the job done. The other side of the wake is, how did I leave people feeling
Yeah.
on the other side of that? Are they happy? Do they feel included? Do they feel heard? Do they feel like they were part of the process? Or
Right.
is it just a bunch of wreckage behind you? So yeah, you got the job done.
But it was expensive.
But
There
I
was an
think
expense
There was an
there.
expense, and I
Yeah.
think people, I think it's
Yeah.
Brendan Burchard who says that high performers
yeah.
have the ability to like really do some great stuff and achieve things, but they keep key relationships intact. And sometimes that can be a challenge when you're somebody who
Yeah.
is kind of a go-getter and an achiever or a leader or whatever.
When you get a little bit of that tunnel vision happening, yeah, can leave a lot of people outside of the tunnel.
I mean, I think we can all reflect upon, you know, early in our day and being like, wow, what was it like on the other side of me today?
Yes.
And sometimes
Yes.
it's hard to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, wow,
Yeah.
I'm not really proud of that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Hopefully not at the risk of too much information, but I have for sure had these conversations with myself and being fairly unforgiving of myself too in that reflective from that reflective point of view. And then I've had to go back and say, okay, you were doing the best you could with what you knew at the time, right? That's okay. It doesn't mean you have to be run over the coals, but now you know more. And to quote Maya Angelou, now that you know more, or when you know better, you do better. When you
Yeah.
know better, you do better. And I'm always like, okay, I can stick with that. Like just to say, I needed to do better, and I've committed to doing better.
Yeah.
Give yourself some grace there too.
We're imperfect beings. We're imperfect beings. And I think some of the greatest leaders are realizing they're always still continuing to learn and evolve as people, and they can always, you know, we make mistakes.
Yeah, we're
We
really
make
good at it.
mistakes. We're really, really good at
Yeah.
it. But some of my people I respect the most are the ones that are willing to own their part
Yep.
and do better.
Yeah, it's fun. It also makes it more fun too. Be like, oh, now I get to like try this new thing in this new way, and things are going better now. You know?
I really, once you start trying new things and like allowing yourself to look a little ridiculous in the process, like I kid you not, my students, I'm be like, we're gonna try something new. You're my guinea pigs. This might like totally crash and burn.
Yeah.
But it's kind of fun.
Yes.
And then people, one of my best bosses I ever had, like didn't know how to do something, and I was like, oh, it was kind of in that perfectionist time, and she's like, let's just try.
Yeah.
What's the worst that can happen?
Right.
Most things are fixable.
Right. Also an important thing to remember. Most things are fixable.
Most things are
Yeah.
fixable.
Yeah. Venus, I have appreciated every second of this interview. And one thing I would like to ask you is pertaining to your time in leadership tomorrow, because there's a rumor that you and your class started that class 26 was the best class. We'll see.
It's not a rumor.
So I'm curious, what would you say would be a major takeaway or something that just stuck with you like glue from your experience in leadership tomorrow?
I think that we all have a vision of what we think leaders should look like. And I have a colorful upbringing, and I couldn't wait to leave my small town and get the heck out of there where people didn't know my story. And so I moved to Grand Island, and I had a chance to like build this new life, and people didn't have to know, you know, where I came from. And so one time I got a gift, because sometimes you get gifts, and you get gifts that you really like, and then other times you get gifts that you're like, I don't know if this was a gift or not. So we were doing an activity for leadership tomorrow, and it was taking place in the gym. And our leader said, everybody get on the half-court line. So we all like lined up side by side, shoulder to shoulder on the half-court line. And he said, based on the way that you answered these questions, you're either going to step forward or back. And I was like, this is great. I love games.
Yeah.
And so he asked a question. I'm going to kind of paraphrase, but he said, if your parents had a higher education, bachelor's degree, master's degree, go ahead and step forward. So some of my peers stepped forward. And then he said, if you have a parent that never graduated high school, go ahead and take a step back. And so I took a step back. And then he said, if you have parents who both are married, go ahead and take a step forward. And so people took a step forward. And then he would say, if your parents are not together, take a step back. So I took a step back, and I was like, I don't really know where this game is going to go. And then he got to some ouchy questions. And he said, has your family ever needed to get government assistance? And if so, take a step back. Or if you have cable TV in a double-car garage, go ahead and take a step forward. And so other people took a step forward. If a parent's ever struggled with an addiction, take a step back. And I felt myself stepping back and back and back. And I did not know what was going on behind me, but I knew what was going on ahead of me.
Right.
And the gap was becoming bigger between me and my peers. And there was a point where I'm like, maybe I should just lie, and maybe I should just, right, because this is what a leader feels like. They should have it all figured out, and they should have it all together. And so the activity went on, and then the leader said, okay, everybody stop. And I was like, oh, this is not looking really good. And he said, now what I want you to do is I want you to turn around and look behind you. And I looked behind me, and nobody was there. I was in last place. And not only was I coming to grips with that, but then I was coming to grips with everybody kind of looking at me like, but she has it all together.
Yeah.
She looks so, right? She's got this perfection thing down. And I really realized, like, I barely made it out. And I called one of my dear friends who also went through LT. And I'm like, I was in last place. And you want to talk about connectedness? And she is a mover and shaker in our community. And she said, I was too. I was in last place too. And so often I want to remind people, like, it doesn't always matter where you start. We all have a story, but it's what you do with it. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about the students that I work with, is that you have a point in your life where you get to decide your story. Like, you can be a victim of it, or you can be a victor, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to be a victor in my life. And that gift, which I did not want that day, I felt like my mask was completely off, and I was
So
bare.
vulnerable.
Oh, so vulnerable. But that was one of the most beautiful gifts that I could ever been given, because it made me step into owning my authentic self.
Yeah.
And not being ashamed of it.
Yeah.
And using my story then to help other people be like, you can still be a leader. You can still be a leader.
Right. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for sharing
Yeah.
that. That was more than I paid for there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Venus.
Thank you.
Okay. Nailed it.
Oh.
Thank you again to Venus King for visiting with me today. Thank you to JBS for being our series sponsor. I'm Lindsay Juergens, and this is Leaders Like Us.